There seem to be two standards of journalism, and depending on where you are in the world, will determine how this played out in different countries. I've highlighted here two individuals. In the context of the United Kingdom, it's Jason Arday. In the context against Anthony Fauci. And this point is really, really important because what we have seen over the pandemic is that there hasn't been a consistent reporting of what has happened and what should be considered to be far more significant than it is. Now, I'll let you know about Jason Arday, but the first thing to make you aware of is that we want to give condolences to his family, to his friends, to his loved ones, because at the middle of this is a life that was lost. And this is the news report that we saw yesterday. And it was due to the fact that Jason Arday, the ex Cambridge professor at the center of a plagiarism scandal, had been found dead. And it's a sad story where he was being investigated for plagiarism. And I couldn't understand for the life of me why this was getting so much media attention in the UK, especially because around the same time, and I did a good analysis of the news stories, there wasn't anything bigger than the Tony Fauci situation that was occurring in the United States. It was relevant across the world, and for some reason, the only place largely that you saw it was on social media. So when we think about what happened here, I think that you have to understand first what in the world was so interesting to the news reporters that caused them to focus on this. Let's hear a little bit about Jason Arday and what was going on in the background. And I will let you compare for yourself whether or not this was relevant enough to be getting this much attention in the news media.
I'm Professor of Sociology of Education at the University of Cambridge.
3 years ago, Jason Arday became the youngest ever black professor appointed at Cambridge University, an 800-year-old institution.
Professor Jason Arday joins us now.
He was interviewed about the achievement on CBS News.
If I'm being absolutely candid and honest, not many teachers at school had any belief in me.
Now Arday has fallen from grace, accused of plagiarizing some of his academic writing and lying about claims he ran 600 miles in 6 days to raise money for charity. The scandal's front-page news here in the UK, and the former professor of sociology of education has now resigned, saying in a statement that it should not be mistaken for an acceptance of the narratives that have surrounded him.
I pause there because, that may be interesting because it's Cambridge. Well, goodness me, why is that such big news around the world? Certainly for UK journalists. We have to now ask, how is it possible that around the same time when the Fauci diaries were released and they were talking about the lab leak question, one of the most serious and significant issues across the world with regards to what happened with the pandemic, how in the world is a plagiarism row that had been going on for 3 years more relevant than that? This is what I'm talking about with this double standard. It is unbelievable. I don't want to say what I think this was about, but I cannot see how that story, even though it had to do with Cambridge, could ever be anywhere close to what had happened with the Fauci case. Now, they hounded him so much in the past week. It was unrelenting focus and pressure. Are you telling me that they had no other newsworthy international topics that should have been taking their attention? Luckily for us, there are people across the world who are raising the kind of questions that should have been raised. And here is one of them asking the hard questions at the time.
Self-adulation that he engaged in? You damn right I do. Because some of the things that he was telling us to do was inconsistent with science, but he was telling us it was science that led to him making the decisions that he made. Masking, 6 feet distancing, the closing of businesses, forcing businesses to push those mandates upon people like me and others. Because I took the vaccine and I took a booster and I wore a mask. And we were told, hey, you ain't gonna get COVID if you do that. And I got COVID. And damn it, it almost killed me. Going into 2022, I'm in the hospital 90 minutes before the ball is about to drop. And the doctor says, we've been at this for 3+ weeks. You got double pneumonia. You look really bad. If this antibiotic and this steroid does not work, Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, we're going to have to call your family. Looks that bad, but we should know in 3 hours. And through the grace of God, 3 hours later, I felt better after they gave me that steroid and that antibiotic. But those were the longest 3 hours of my life because I thought it was over. And I remember I had done exactly what Dr. Anthony Fauci was imploring us all to do.
Now, as I said, these are not equivalent stories. There is no way that this is comparable. A plagiarism row, whether or not somebody did 300 miles or 200 miles in a marathon. I mean, yeah, you can investigate it internally, but how in the world does that get to be center stage when you have a story like Fauci, which is still unfolding? Listen, they no longer can focus on Professor Arday because he's no longer here. Do you see any news reports talking about Fauci in your main news? How is that possible? At this stage, I mean, who is able to have that kind of reach in editorial departments, newspapers, television? How in the world is this Fauci not front and center every single day? I mean, when you think about some of the stories that are coming out in relation to this, and this is the thing, a lot of people are not aware of what is going on. They don't realize the significance of it, and they don't understand just how important it is. I'm going to play you another clip, and this one here is with Redfield. Redfield was the ex-CDC director. And so he was around at the time of Fauci. And this time they're talking about the concerns with regards to pregnancy. And this was something that was raised in the diaries as to his question marks. But maybe they were reassured in the few months, but he was promoting and pushing it in terms of pregnancies to get the COVID vaccine. And there's still many institutions that stand by that decision. My personal and research position is that you should have, if you were going to do it, you should have targeted the high risk in pregnancy. We knew what they were: older age, comorbidities, very similar to what happened in terms of severe disease in the pandemic. And they thought that it was going to protect infants. I mean, newborns made no sense because newborns weren't really dying of COVID anyway. So we had this very strange situation where this was mandated. Now you have to remember, because if someone is pregnant and working, they did not get an exemption to not be vaccinated because mandates were there. So it was still technically mandated. That's pretty serious in my view. But listen to what Dr. Redfield says here.
people couldn't be trusted with this information? Because in my mind, if you're a believer in vaccines, and look, we were both part of Operation Warp Speed that happened during the Trump tenure, more information is better in instilling public trust.
I think there was a concerted effort by some, including Fauci, that we didn't want any information to be out in the public that would discourage people from being vaccinated. So the whole issue of vaccine side effects or vaccine injury was real, or the fact that the vaccine didn't really work in preventing infection, because I had a number of patients in the spring of 2020 that were having their second or third episode of COVID, even though they've been vaccinated. You know, Biden was incorrect when he said this is an epidemic of the unvaccinated. We knew that the vaccinated, in fact, got infected because the vaccine was non-durable. So very disappointing, because I think there was a view that some have, and, I think Tony was in this view, was that he knew better what was right for you than you knew better what was right for you. So he'd make his decision for you.
So again, as you can see, these are the stories that are coming through at the moment. This should literally be front and center of every news report, newspaper, main news, looking through the diaries, trying to understand what was said, and there is no interest. Instead, they are focused on whether or not a Cambridge professor cited somebody's other paper in terms of plagiarism. I mean, come on. It's not that that's not important, but that's an internal matter for Cambridge. How in the world is that main news when you have something so significant occurring that has been downplayed? I think that there is some degree of responsibility here, and the media need to look back at this. And I think that when you look at each country, because I know people are watching from different parts of the world, if you have a public broadcaster, so say for instance, in the UK, it would be the BBC, I don't know how you get the minutes of the editorial meetings, how they came to their decisions about what would be the focus. What was their justification for not focusing on Fauci and choosing Professor plagiarism story that was ultimately tied to someone's death? What is that about? The lesson that I had been taught by an independent journalist is the principle that you need to ask better and harder questions. Because when scrutiny is following a narrative that is convenient rather than the public consequence of something, that is not journalism, because journalism still needs to uncover facts. But that is no longer being applied in an equal standard. And this is what we are seeing. As I said, you just need to do the job of looking through the news reports in your relevant country. Look over the past week and a half, because in the UK, it was about a professor and plagiarism. What was it in Australia? What was it in New Zealand? What was it across Europe? They were finding almost any other story than what really had some of the most significant consequences. I still cannot understand how that is possible in the media today. And sadly, that is reflective of the fact that truthfully people need to now start listening elsewhere if they want to hear. Our job is not just to consume this, but to raise awareness of it to people around you. Because many people still think that everything that happened in COVID was perfectly fine. If there were any issues, they would have heard about it. And they don't realize these conflicts are occurring. And what you do is you just put it in front of them. Let them do the research. Let them look at the facts. Because as I said, this year, Anthony Fauci's diaries, there is no story that is bigger than this. This is probably as big as the Iran war or something like that. This is huge, and it has huge implications. Everybody should be reflecting on it, reading it, understanding what it means and what could have happened in the pandemic. So I thank you for being with me. Just remember that in the description below, we are working on the nitric oxide secrets, the master molecule. There will be free chapters available, and we want you to support us as we try and find solutions for people's health at this time. There's still a lot of work to do, and everybody needs to start making sure that relevant news doesn't get caught up in the narrative. Just force people to listen and know what is going on. Have a great evening.